Hello, BookTube. This is Bookcase 3, the second shelf, and the third and final part of that shelf. I wanted to do this part separate because it all is related to um, one sailor. Um, it's a common thread running through all these books. And let's get started. So the first volume is this great big National Geographic thing. You can find this, it looks different depending on the edition. Here are the end papers. The same on both. Oh, here's a more modern ship on the other side. Very nice. Nice heavy buckram. And the name of this book is Men, Ships, and the Sea. By Captain Alan Villiers. And he is going to be the theme of the rest of these books and the and other adventures on the sea. So he didn't write the whole thing. It's a volume in the Story of Man library prepared by the National Geographic Book Service, National Geographic Society, Washington, D.C. And they're always, this was 1962. So there you go. This is also a book from when I was a young fella that really got me into ships in the sea. This is Perry. And then, let's see. There's the Coast Guard cutter. A big influence on why I went in the Coast Guard. My imagination was stoked by their work in this book. This is USS Skate breaking through the ice in the Arctic submarine. There's the Eagle before they put the Coast Guard stripe on her. I like her with the Coast Guard stripe. She's been aboard and her many times. Accompanied her on a cruise to Europe, although I was on another ship that was running in a group with them. So, really well illustrated. Like I say, you know, one of those books, especially when you're young, it fires your imagination. And so really had fun with it. So there's the first of the Villiers books. So we had a visitor there. The next Alan Villiers book, I hope you can see, it's got this plastic to try. There's the man himself. A personal anthology of ships and men. Masking tape get old and nasty looking. It's $5.95 when it came out. Scotch tape, I guess. So it's Arco Publishing Company Incorporated, New York. This is the second printing of 65. The original was in 62. And it's what it says it is. It's a personal anthology. So the Mayflower 2 was a replica of the Pilgrim Father's Mayflower. And it sailed from Plymouth, England to Plymouth, Mass. In 1957. And Villiers was the captain on that. He did a lot of that stuff with replicas. So these are short pieces. Nice anthology. This next one I read a few years ago. I was thrilled to find it. The Bounty Ships of France, Alan Villiers and Henry Picard, the story of the French Cape Horn sailing ships. Here's the end papers. Let's see if I can show you some of them. So the French Parliament and people subsidized the great sailing ships of their merchant marine because they believed them to be a national asset. The Bounty Ships of France tells the first time in English the story of these beautiful ships, which were such a distinct feature of the French merchant marine between 1870 and 1920. They were called bounty ships because of the mileage and building bounties, or subsidies, their owners were paid by the state. France had many overseas possessions, many cargoes, and the sailors were the most economical means of moving the cargoes and of creating and maintaining a reserve of splendid, fearless seamen for the Navy in the time of war. So this was published by Charles Scribner's Son, New York, and it was published in 1972. So this would be a first edition of that. The next Alan Villiers, the funny thing is I've got a pile of them here and I've got nowhere near everything he did. The title is Posted Missing, the story of ships lost without a trace in recent years. Years would be based on when the book was published, obviously. So it was published by Charles Scribner's Son, New York. And it was published in, this copy's from 74, but it's originally from 1956. Maps, sketches, and end papers were by Samuel Bryant. So it'll give the story of different ships lost, and in this case they're showing all these Lloyd's notices. Lloyd's of London is the insurance company for a lot of these very expensive and large merchant ships, and they're the ones who track ships across the sea. So here's another Lloyd's notice. So, interesting book. Next, Wild Ocean, the story of the North Atlantic and the men who sailed it. There's Captain Villiers again. There's the end papers, Occurrence of the North Atlantic. McGraw-Hill Book Company Incorporated, New York, Toronto, and London, 1957. The North Atlantic is the high road to all the oceans and all the seas, sailed by Columbus, Cook, Cabral, Cabot, da Gama, Magellan, Diaz, Drake. Not just some of the great discoverers, but all of them. The scene of 1,000 sea fights, great and small, ocean of the speeding down east clippers, and the glorious white-winged flying yachts of the China sea trade. Sea road to the slavers, hunting grounds of the pirates and privateers, used by the greatest ships of the past and the greatest ships of the present. Crossed and crisscrossed by the busiest sea routes in the world. Hurried by over 1 million sea passengers in 1956, with another million hurrying even faster in the air. How stirring a sea this is. How great its story. So, might not have quite the role, although I saw it was a huge one, as it did when he wrote this. This is another nice little book. Another Villiers. Vanished Fleets. This is a story, sea stories from old Van Diemen's Land. Pen papers. This was let's see, it's Charles Scribner's Sons again, New York. And this was first published in 1931, reprinted in 1975. So, let's see. This was a good read. I don't know much about the history there, but it was fun to read. First published in 31, and now revised and updated with additional photographs and a new introduction by the author. This is the adventurous maritime history of the colorful land known as Tasmania, formerly the notorious Devil's Island or Van Diemen's Land, for convicts shipped from England. Little had been written about the island off the coast of New South Wales before Alan Villiers, then a young seaman, arrived on the scene in the mid-1920s. The result of his 5-year stay is this fascinating story of pirates, whalemen, escaping convicts, adventurers, and pioneers. A good book. And then the last one I have of his, and there's many, many more of his, is The War with Cape Horn, Alan Villiers. Here's the end papers. Title page. So the drawings and maps are by Adrian Small. The War with Cape Horn by Alan Villiers, Charles Scribner's son, New York, in 1971. This is a complete, authentic account of the voyages of the great square riggers fighting around the Horn. The War with Cape Horn brings the Cape Horn story into the middle of the 20th century. For 100 years, sailing ships have been making the perilous voyage, with profit to the owners, but at great cost in vessels and men. The big steel barks carried thousands of tons, and their sail spread was enormous. Their crews, however, were small and very young. American, British, German, French, Scandinavian ships. They risked the Horn each year by the hundreds, and Alan Villiers vividly records their achievements and disasters. He has gone to the sources heretofore unused, at Lloyd's, which is the insurance company we were talking about earlier, and at the British National Maritime Museum. But his most valuable source has been the ship's masters whom he has known, and he writes, of course, out of his own long experience in deep water sails, from able seaman to captain. About the author, the foremost living authority on the sailing ship, Alan Villiers is the author of The Way of a Ship, Captain James Cook, and Sons of Sinbad, among many other books. At 15, he sailed away from Australia on a square rigger, and in 1935, he was the master of the Joseph Conrad, the last full-rigged ship to round Cape Horn. So that's it on Alan Villiers, and that's it on the second shelf of the third bookcase. Thank you, BookTube.